Okay, I'm calling this meeting to order at 7:01 p.m. Please all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance if you can. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing for a moment of silence or a silent prayer as your conscience finds appropriate. Thank you. Please be seated. Members of the council, you have an agenda before you. Are any changes required to that agenda? Hearing none. Why don't I make sure that I can hear everybody before we go any further? Councilmember Dixon, can you please say a word or two so I can make sure I can hear you? I cannot hear you.
How about now?
I can hear you now. That's great. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Councilmember Foe, I heard you earlier, but just for completeness, can you please say a word or two?
Hello, everyone.
Great. Councilmember Lingua, can you please speak?
Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year, Councilman. Councilmember Henry, can you please say a word or two? You are on mute according to the list, Councilmember.
All right. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Thank you very much. Councilmember Richardson contacted town staff and said that she would be late arriving, perhaps at 7:30. We should see her soon. Councilmember Mayers, can you say a few words? Councilmember Mayers? Can't hear you.
Hello, can you hear?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank
Good
you very
evening.
much.
Good evening, Mayor Costa.
Good evening. It's great to have everyone here. Have a nearly full house. That's good. Okay. So now that I've made sure that you can all speak, and I haven't heard any changes to the agenda, then I'm going to assume that we are ready to approve the agenda for this evening. Are there any public comments on the agenda before? Well, why don't we have a motion to approve the agenda as is, and then we can have public comments at that time.
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Motion has been made by Councilmember Foe. I believe it was seconded by Councilmember Dixon. So is there any discussion of the agenda? And is there any public comment on the agenda? Hearing none, I will do a roll call vote on the agenda. A motion to approve the agenda. Councilmember Dixon.
Aye.
Councilmember Foe.
Aye.
Councilmember Lingua.
Aye.
Councilmember Henry.
All right.
Councilmember Richardson is still absent, I believe. Councilmember Mayers.
Aye.
And I abstain. The motion passes 5-0-1. That brings us on the agenda to the presentation from Gentry Jones, Finance Manager, on budget assumptions. Mr. Jones.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight's presentation is going to touch upon the budget assumptions as well as budget priorities, budget guidelines, budget challenges, and budget opportunities.
If you hold one moment, Mr. Jones, Mr. Shelton, can you pull up the PowerPoint presentation, please? Or Ms. Barnes? This will just take a minute, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Jones, if you want to proceed, sir, thank you.
Sure. Yes, so the first portion of this presentation covers the budget assumptions. Okay, so to begin, we have 8 building blocks that provide structure and guidance for the staff team as we develop the budget assumptions as well as the proposed budget. So here we have listed the 5-year projections, a conservative approach, guiding principles, fund balance goals, values, vision and commitment statements, debt service goals, and best practices. So on the following slides, I'll go into more detail for each of these, starting with 5-year projections. So for our 5-year projections, these are going to be our best guess at the time that the projections are made. They are intended to assist with long-range strategic decision-making. And of course, as budget assumptions and the budget is developed, the budget committee will have a better understanding of these decisions being made in real time. As we move forward, we like to have a long view approach, high level, and that's how we come to our 5-year projections. Next building block is Riverdale Park values. So the budget assumptions and the budget development, it requires that we have a shared understanding of what the town values. While all of these town values help to shape the budget, due to the impact of COVID-19, additional focus will likely be placed on economic and community development, as well as housing in neighborhoods. So the Riverdale Park values, they include diversity and inclusion, ethics and character, transparency, fiscal accountability, housing and neighborhoods, sustainability, community engagement, economic and community development, and professional, well-trained. Next building block is to take a conservative approach. So as we fund services, we'd like to do so in the most effective and efficient manner. We'd like to develop reasonable and defendable financial projections. We'd like to streamline the process. And lastly, fund for the future. Next building block is a vision statement, which is a working draft, but it states that the town of Riverdale Park will be the location of choice for residents, businesses, visitors, and employees. Town of Riverdale Park will be the location of choice by supporting programs, initiatives, and projects that advance diversity and inclusion. So the vision statement is something that we've worked on as a team, but again, our focus is going to be on a lot of the items that I just mentioned, as well as transparency, and lastly, professional and well-trained employees. The next building block is the vision, commitment, and policy statements. So the proposed statements for the remaining core areas of community engagement, ethics and character, and professional and well-trained employees includes the vision, commitment, and policy statements. So diversity and inclusion, housing and neighborhoods, sustainability, business and economic development, infrastructure, arts and recreation, transportation, ethical governance, and data-driven decision-making. The next slide covers the building block guiding principles. So the main area of focus here for listen, study, and be focused is actually a part of what's occurring this evening. As the budget calendar shows, we have scheduled opportunities for public and the staff team to listen to concerns and questions before the actual proposed budget is submitted. It also gives opportunity for public input before the mayor and council actually acts to approve a budget. E5 equals excellence in service. This principle is one we've had for a little while now. Essentially, the 5 E's are ethics, expectations, efficiencies, effectiveness, and execution. So this is something that staff has worked on and continues to work on, and we apply that to the budget process as well. The budget committee, leadership team and staff team collaboration, not much really to elaborate on this one, except to say that we do work together on the proposed budget that will be delivered to the mayor and council. Balance more than numbers. This principle has always been important. With the times that we're facing now, it's more important than ever. Budgeting is more than just paying bills. It's developing a plan for the future of the town and the narrative of where the town is going. So balancing competing demands, revenue restrictions, it's going to require careful study and decision-making, especially with the tough times that we are experiencing right now. The next building block is debt service goals. Here, our goals are to leverage our existing debt. We'd like to increase PAYGO, as well as not add additional new debt, especially with the times we're in right now. We'd like to draw down our existing loan balances. So basically spend the funds that we've previously borrowed and that are available. The next building block is the fund balance goals. We have multiple fund balances, all listed here, starting with the general fund reserve. Our goal for the general fund reserve is to maintain at least 2 million. 6.67% is the requirement by the GFOA. Historically, we've been around 33%, which is about 4 months of reserve funding, and we look to maintain that balance. For the OPEB fund, our goal is to increase the balance by at least $50,000. For the Economic Development Fund, we'd like to maintain funding at the FY 2021 levels, our current fiscal year. For Community Development Fund, goal is the same, maintaining funding at the current fiscal year. Health and Wellness Fund, our goal is to maintain funding as well at the FY 2021 levels. And for the Special Revenue Fund, TIF, our goal is to manage the fund and monitor completion schedules, particularly the Riverdale Park Station development. For Debt Service Reserve Fund, the goal is to decrease reliance on this reserve account to pay the existing indebtedness. For the Capital Improvement Fund, our goals are to increase the transfer to CIP as a means through PAYGO acquisitions. So, like I stated earlier, we'd like to increase our PAYGO rather than incurring new debt to make capital improvement fund purchases. The next slide covers the best practices. This slide is included to share that the Office of Finance Services, in going about financial programs, budget committee, and the leadership team, we don't intend to reinvent the wheel by going outside of the established standards and adhering to the many established organizations that we see on the slide. So that would be the GFOA, which is the Government Finance Officials Association. That's actually who issued out our distinguished budget presentation. I'm sorry, our distinguished budget award. So we adhere to the distinguished budget presentation guidelines when putting together the budget. The Maryland Department of Legislative Affairs, Local Government Finances. It's another organization that we adhere to. GASB, which is the Government Accounting Standards Board, and GAAP, the Generally Accepted Accounting Principles. So, lastly is the Maryland Municipal League. They also provide some sample policies. So, these are a list of some of the organizations that we adhere to and their established standards. So that concludes the building blocks. Next, I'm going to cover FY 2022 budget assumptions. So the next is operating revenue. So the town's operating revenue is grouped into the following major categories: local taxes, administrative fees, fines and forfeitures, licenses and permits, intergovernmental revenues. And so some of the key variables for our operating revenue are local taxes, fee schedules, intergovernmental revenues, and automated enforcement revenue. So for local taxes, the budget committee is operating under the assumption that local tax rates will not increase. So we do expect some consistency there. For fee schedules, the budget committee is operating under the assumption that fees for service will remain flat. For intergovernmental revenues, the budget committee is also operating under the assumption that these revenues will remain relatively flat. And for the automated enforcement revenue, committee is continuing the approach of the previous budget seasons, and that approach is to scale back on the reliance of this funding source as it's very unpredictable. This year alone, we've seen a considerable increase in the revenue that wasn't expected, and two fiscal years ago there was a dramatic decrease there. So it's a very unreliable source, and our goal is to not rely so much on such an unpredictable funding source. The next budget assumption is the operating expenses. So the town's operating expenses are grouped into the following major categories: salaries and wages, benefits, overtime, contractual services, operating expenses, weather response services, municipal center buildings, community events, and community grants. Key variables for our operating expenses are here listed on the slide. So we have salary and wages, healthcare benefits, contractual services, workers' compensation, and defined benefit retirement plan. So currently for the salary and wages, in regards to the staffing schedule, the current budget has 2 positions that are to be funded beginning of this month. We have delayed filing these positions under a further review of our revenues. The vacant police lieutenant position is scheduled to be funded as of April 1st. No additional positions will be sought in the FY 2022. Uh, it's also regarding salary and wages. Budget Committee is operating on the assumption that merit and step increases, as well as promotional opportunities and cost of living increase, will be included in the upcoming budget. Healthcare benefits, the town will not have updated numbers until mid to late March, which has been consistent with other budget seasons. Budget Committee is operating under the assumption of a potential 10% increase in those healthcare benefits. For workers' comp, the Budget Committee is assuming an increase in this category due to both legal fees as well as contracts to supplement staff operations that have been impacted by COVID-19. For workers' comp, the town has experienced several lost time staff injuries. So we won't have final numbers until mid to late March for this category as well, but it can be increased by, we estimate 7 to 11%. And the last category is the defined benefit retirement plan. The town has recently gotten word from Bolton that the town may have to increase its contribution amount as well. So these are the key variables that we are looking at as we move forward with the budget. The next assumption is capital improvement. Key variables for this particular category include restricted use revenues, PAYGO revenues, vehicle and equipment assessment. So as indicated in FY 2021 5-year projections, PAYGO CIP acquisitions are anticipated to be tight for the next several years. And we are looking for alternative funding sources. So rather than looking at things how we have traditionally looked to fund projects, we're looking at alternative funding options. So we're looking at grants, other various options, private-public partnerships, things of that nature as we move forward. With that, the town has been successful in securing federal dollars for various capital projects. So we'll look to continue to find sourcing with additional opportunities there. Between that and the annual vehicle equipment assessment, those are the key variables for capital. So that pretty much covers all three of our budget assumptions. Next slide is a brief summary of what I've just covered. We'll start with the operating revenues. So there's no changes to the real property tax rate, no changes to the business personal property tax rate, no changes to the operating property tax rate, no changes to the admissions and amusement tax rate, and no changes in the fee schedule. For the expenses, brief summary just to kind of go over what we've covered. Salary and wages fund merit and stop COLA increases, healthcare and benefits. We expect increases contractual services. We anticipate an increase related to COVID-19. Workers' comp, we anticipate a significant increase, and with defined benefits, we also anticipate additional contribution from the town. The last summary covers the CIP. PAYGO needs to be increased. Alternative project delivery is required. We have multi-year alternative funding plan that's needed, and the annual update of vehicle equipment and infrastructure assessments are required. So yeah, that covers the budget assumptions. Next portion of the presentation is to cover the budget priorities, budget guidelines, the budget challenges, and the budget opportunities. So the first for FY 2022 is budget priorities. On the next slide, please. Staff budget priorities. First, our first priority for the budget is delivery of services to town residents. Community and economic development, something that we look to focus on, especially with everything happening with COVID. The retirement plan, equipment purchases and upgrades, vehicle replacements, and future funding for CIP. So for this particular slide, we've listed priorities that have been identified by staff, and we just ask that mayor and council could potentially think of anything that they might feel they would like to see in the budget and make note of such and let us know. But what we have outlined on this slide is what a staff has put together. So the next slide covers budget guidelines. So the staff utilizes the GFOA. Mentioned this in the previous slide, but the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award Guidelines are what we use. The main criteria for this, it includes the financial structure, policy and process, financial summaries, capital and debt, departmental information, and document-wide criteria. So just a brief tidbit about the GFOA, but they actually put together a Distinguished Budget Presentation Award program back in 1984. And, they use it to encourage and assist state and local governments to help prepare their budget documents. So, they go through a rigorous review process, and they have, a list of guidelines that, governments must adhere to in order to submit for review. So previous budget we put through, we actually received the award, so we've continued to adhere to these guidelines. The next is budget challenges. So number one on the list is COVID-19 uncertainty. As we all know, through the current times, there is a lot of uncertainty, and with so, we've determined that we do need to be conservative moving forward with our budget. Next challenge is funding and planning for CIP expenditures. There will be some difficulty funding capital acquisitions as well as many new projects. As far as availability of funds, we have extinguished much of the funding in FY20 and the current year, FY21, for capital acquisitions. As far as funding projects, we do see some issues in doing so because of the extinguishing of our funds. The last challenge we have listed is the debt service. This is another challenge that the town faces. We have 3 loans, and we completed a defeasance action on a 30-year loan and a reallocation action on both the 15 and the 30-year loans. This action has assisted in repositioning the town's debt, and it's provided funds for the completion of a variety of projects for FY20. But moving forward for the new project, that is something that we are keeping an eye on, as it is a challenge that we have outlined for the up-and-coming budget. The last that I will be covering for this portion is the budget opportunities. So for real property tax, we do still continue to be conservative in our estimates of our real property tax revenue. In doing so, we don't want to overestimate our revenue. And any additional revenue that exceeds our estimates could be potentially used for CIP. I mentioned that we're looking forward for other funding sources, but feel that the real property tax, there is a budget opportunity here for CIP funding of projects. But again, we are going to be very conservative here, especially with everything that's going on with COVID-19. Now, speed camera revenue, this is another budget opportunity that we found. We will continue to be conservative here with our estimates. We don't want to overestimate just because of how much uncertainty surrounds the speed camera revenue. While it's up significant this current fiscal year, we don't want to rely on that and overestimate revenue and find ourselves in a bad place. So we are moving forward with the speed camera revenue, looking at it as a potential opportunity to fund some CIP projects. But again, we are proceeding with our budget process, moving as conservative as we can. And yes, that concludes the project.
If,
Up for questions and comments.
if I could add just two things on the opportunity slide. The real estate market, especially on the residential side, appears to be very strong. There's so when it comes to real property tax revenue, there's a single family home that recently sold on Queensberry for $780,000. There's another home for sale on Sheridan for over $800,000. Properties seem to be moving quickly, and they are being sold above the appraised value. So with all the uncertainty going on, at least currently, the town's real estate assessable base appears strong, and that is a strength for the town. It truly is. Lots of municipalities are seeing bases shrink during this crisis, and we're seeing ours expand slightly. And as Mr. Jones said, the speed camera revenue presents an opportunity because we could fund more with the police department, freeing up other funds for the CIP projects. And Mr. Jones, correct me if I'm wrong, but we run 2 months behind on the collection of speed camera revenue. So at the 6-month point into the year, we've collected 4 months worth of revenue. And I believe we're at about 75% of budget already, and that's 4 months in. So we will exceed the budgeted amount for speed camera revenue considerably in this year. The bad news is we have more people speeding on our streets, and at a time when we have more people walking and biking and trying to venture outdoors a little. We have too many people who are speeding through the community. So, Mr. Jones, thanks for the opportunity to add my 2 cents on the last slide and for the presentation.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Thank you, John. You took one of my comments away from me about the speed camera revenue. I agree that that's an unfortunate opportunity, that we would much rather have compliance and safety than the extra revenue. But I agree that if we get it, and we are definitely not depending on it, that using it for CIP and other budgetary items is a good way to use that revenue. I have 2 questions about the presentation, and then I will open it up to other council members. The first, you mentioned the workers' compensation increase, and I was wondering what that was in sort of absolute numbers. I know that it's going to be a fractional increase, but just a high fractional increase, but I'm just curious as to what it was going to be in tens of thousands of dollars, that sort of level.
And I'll take a stab, Mr. Jones, if you want to add on to this. I believe we currently pay about 180,000. We had a projection where it was going to be over 2, and then we got some discount points. But it's really kind of hard to tell until they're done working through these lost time injuries. But we did have some employees unfortunately suffer some significant injuries. And anytime you have a lost time injury, that equates to points on what's known as an experience modification. So they give you a premium, and you want your experience modification to be no more than 1. And for a long time, our experience modification, we held slightly below 1, so we would get discounts. And but if it exceeds 1, when they take the premium time, the experience modification, then it increases by that percent. So I know Mr. Smith met with our workman's comp folks actually over the holiday, and unfortunately he couldn't be here tonight. So I don't have an update on what that discussion was, but that's something we can get for you, Mr. Mayor, in terms of real dollars.
Okay, but a round number of maybe $20,000 or $30,000 is.
I'm thinking between 15 and 30.
Okay, that helps. Thank you. And one other question also on insurance is whether you had any assumptions on our general liability insurance costs. Are they staying flat? Are you assuming that?
Right now, we believe they likely will stay close to flat. If we see an increase, it may be like 2%. And Mr. Jones, I think we pay, it's just under 90,000 a year for legit.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so that's a pretty small increase in absolute dollars.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I will turn it over to other members of the council who have questions at this time, and then to members of the public after that. Are there other council members who have questions for Mr. Jones or Mr. Lustitian?
Yes. I was going to speak to this in my ward report, but I've had a lot of constituent complaints about traffic issues that you just mentioned, Mr. Town Manager. Would that make us potentially look at the acquisition of more speed cameras throughout town? I don't know if that applies here or not, or I should then. I just wondered if that's something that we would consider as staff or as police department.
Well, I think that's something that we'd have to talk with Chief Morris about. As you know, the council recently approved the lowered speed limit on town roads or roads that the town controls. And so we're hoping that the lowered speed limit assist, and as well as our public information campaigns and that for our walk, bike, drive safety initiative. But Chief Morris, can you comment briefly on this?
So briefly, I'm mindful that speed cameras regulations are very strict, that they have to be within a half-a-mile radius of a school zone, which the council has previously identified and is in code. The cameras can only be operated Monday through Friday from 6 in the morning till 8 in the evening. And I'm always very mindful that our cameras are placed in areas where they're supported by traffic studies. Specifically on East-West Highway, we have to fund a traffic study, which is done through the speed camera revenue, because the speed program, automated speed enforcement program, Safe Speed for Students, has to fund itself. So we have to perform certain traffic studies on an annual basis. I share that with you, council member, and with the mayor and the council and the community, because I think it's very important that we demonstrate that our use of the camera systems is truly to reduce speed, to reduce accidents related to speeding, and that it doesn't appear to be used for any other reason. So I'm sensitive to your question, but I want to make sure that we are conveying the proper narrative and message to the community.
Thank you, Chief.
I'm going to hop in on the chief's comment there and just add one remark, which is that I heard recently that during the pandemic, where people are speeding all across the country, that both fatalities and severe injuries are both up significantly because of that extra speed. So speed does kill, it does maim, and keeping the speeds down is a good target to have. Are there other council questions for on the budget presentation?
Mr. Mayor, hearing none from the other council members, I'm going to jump in here real quick, and I want to we circle back onto the budget assumption summary, and those are things that I was making a note here as you were speaking. And this is obviously a subject matter that concerns me, and certainly raised the flags for further discussion, and maybe not at this time, but I would like to bring up these points of significance. Workers' compensation anticipated significant increase is expected to be 11%. And if I heard Mr. Lestitian correctly tonight, our current payout is $180K. And is Mr. Lestitian, I would ask you to comment on that. Is that for the FY20 fiscal budget, or is that a cutoff of last year's? And I think I heard you said that the projection for this year is in the 200,000s.
Yes. Yes, sir. I'll be happy to try to respond. I don't have the actual numbers in front of me. My recollection is that we budgeted in the range of 200, and we received some discount points and got it slightly lower. I believe Mr. Jones quoted anywhere from 7 to 11% in that range. And that's our best guess at this point. And all these numbers will solidify in the coming months. And unfortunately, Mr. Smith is not able to be here this evening. He would be able to speak to this definitively. So I'll follow up, and I can report back to the council some more definitive projection there, sir, in terms of actual dollars.
Very good. Thank you for that. And you explained further on the experience modification. So experience modification, could you expand upon that? What exactly is an experience modification?
An experience modification, and I'm not a workman's comp person in terms of making these calculations. That's what the folks at Chesapeake Insurance do for us. But essentially, they have a formula, and if you have less injuries than your experience in terms of interacting or making claims with the insurance company, is assigned a lower number. And they calculate your premium, and after they calculate your premium, they multiply that by the experience modification. If you have a number of 1, then there's no effect. 1 times your premium is your premium. If it's less than 1, then you receive a discount on your premium. If it's greater than 1, which we anticipated being greater than 1 with these injuries we've experienced in the past number of months, then that means your premium increases. So that's how it's handled. How they actually calculate the exact experience modification, that, sir, I'm not qualified to respond to.
Understand. So the assumption here is that the experience modification was adequately prepared for pre-COVID-19.
Well, it was,
So-
what we're saying is that with the injuries we've had in the current year, that when they calculate our new premium, mid to late March, our number is going to be above 1. The experience modification will be above 1. So
Mhm.
where exactly above 1, I don't know. But when they calculate that, then our rate's going to go up by the equivalent percent.
Understood. Understood. Okay, moving right along. Don't make to berate that any further. On the defined benefits, anticipated additional contributions, do you have an idea of what the increased assumption is?
We're still working with Bolton on that. Their initial projections, they were saying around 2%. We have lots of questions for them, and we don't necessarily agree with their analysis. Their analysis went through June 30, and I just received this on New Year's Eve. And actually, Mr. Jones and I met on it today very briefly. What we know is that their analysis showed a return on the plan for the period of July 1, 2019 through June 30, 2020, where the investments grew less than 7%. But what we also know is that so far this year, PNC reports that for the year ending on New Year's Eve, that we're up over 9% for the year. So we actually have to get PNC and Bolton to chat and to make sure that we're all looking at the same numbers. But right now it could potentially be 2%. I think it's going to be less than that once we get the portfolio manager and the actuary just chatting about these most recent updates. Because again, because Bolton's analysis at this point is dated because it goes back to June 30.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, moving right along. Thank you for your explanation. On the budget opportunities, real property taxes, it's good to hear that the assessment values for properties are certainly skyrocketing in the community and in our municipality specifically. What is the real estate property increase going to look like across the spectrum if houses are catapulting, increasing over the percentage value by over 100% value? What does that look like for projection of tax increases?
Well, we are assuming a flat tax rate. We're not assuming a constant yield rate. We won't have information from the state on the assessment until right about Valentine's Day. So either on February 14th or February 15th, we'll receive the annual constant yield notice. And that'll give us an idea of how the assessable base may have grown. As I've cautioned in other meetings, I'm concerned about retraction in the assessable base in year 2023 in the office sector and in the retail sector. Those are two areas not in this budget year that we're preparing for, but in the following year, I'm concerned about some retraction there. So at the end of February, we'll be able to report to the council more clearly on where the town's assessable base is.
Good enough. And when will the homeowners be notified?
They will be receiving their individual assessment notices, right, I guess, starting, so they'll get their annual tax bill, but notified of their assessment or notified of what the town's doing?
Notified on their assessments as far as the increase of taxes for real estate value per housing.
Yes, I don't know the exact timing of when the state sends out notices.
Okay, Okay, that's fair. That's fair. You don't know, you don't know. And
Can I jump
finally-
in, Mr. Councilman Henry? Can I jump
Sure.
in on that?
Sure, please
We
do.
we're only assessed once every 3 years. And in between that time, because of limitations on the so-called homeowners homestead tax credit, then the assessed value of everyone's home cannot exceed more than 10% in a given calendar year. And so by looking at the assessment that was received at the last assessment, you can predict what your assessment is going to be this year, pretty much. It just spreads out the assessment over the 3 years in between actual reassessments. So the round number is that at the current tax rate, the town's bill, the bill that the homeowners receive, and most homeowners who have a mortgage, the mortgage company receives it, then that increase will not be more than 10%. And for me, the town's fraction of the bill, as I remember it, is something around $1,800 per year. And so I will receive no more than about a $180 increase in my tax bill from the town for the year.
Okay, very good explanation. All right, and so the last thing that I had to ask about was the speed camera revenue. And Mr. Mayor, I think you came in here and you did speak on this as well too. And I think it was said, and I can't remember who said it, either Ms. Lestitian or you, Mr. Mayor, but can the speed cameras revenue be utilized as part of the CIP?
And as a general principle, no. Speed camera revenues go to funding the police and police operations. However, if we have excess over budget of speed camera revenue, that frees up other revenue sources that can be used for CIP. So if we had budgeted, for example, in the current year, we're somewhere in the mid fives. So like 530, 540,000 was our budgeted amount. And we've pulled in, Mr. Jones, do you have that number handy? It's like 375 or something, the last I looked.
Yeah, we're at 378.
Okay. And so that's 4 months revenue for the year. So we will exceed what it is that we budgeted. And so that means that we won't need general fund dollars to flow to other things in the police department. And so those dollars then can be freed up to pay for CIP. So directly, it's not for CIP. Indirectly, it can have an effect where it frees up other funds to fund CIP acquisitions.
Okay, that clarifies that question in my head circulating, because it reaches back to me what the chief said. The narrative on the specific purpose of the speed camera is to fund the police department for specific traffic calming. So, I mean, if we're using the speed cameras for specifically the police department, in which it was specifically designed for, it was specifically designed to save lives for people speeding. And I agree with all of you. I do see speeding on the highways, the byways, and the local streets. I do see an increase in speeding. And I do think that there needs to be more speed cameras set up throughout. And I understand the restrictions that are around setting up speed cameras, but specifically, and I'm glad to hear you say, Mr. Lestitian, that it's really not a line item that can be used as a capital investment program for our budget opportunities. It's an item that can shed some load from our budget opportunities in order to fund other departments, not the police department.
Yes, or it could be CIP related to the police department. It can just free up additional funds for other purposes.
Okay, understood. Understood. Okay, thank you. I yield.
Thank you, council member, for your questions.
Are there additional council questions?
Hey,
Hello?
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yes, your voice is very faint. If you can get a little closer to the microphone, it would help.
A little close.
And I can't hear you at all now if you're speaking.
Yeah, big fingers. I'm sorry about that. Is that better for you?
Yes.
Good. One comment and one question. The one comment I had, again, back to the opportunity. I cringe at thinking that speed camera revenue is being considered an opportunity when it's more of a independent variable at best. While we do project what our revenue may be for a year, it's more so done on a not so much really being dependent upon it, but as being more as essentially a windfall of sorts. Fortunate that it is when folks are speeding. I hear opportunity. It just it doesn't ring well. I'm hoping that maybe in the future we can find another way to classify it going forward. The one question I had regarding on the various different funds that we're looking at, our Economic Development Fund, our Community Development Fund, and our General Reserve Fund. I was wondering if you could expand on those a little bit more so we have an understanding where those are. I know our Economic Development Fund and our Community Development Fund have been integral to helping out residents and businesses during the past 9 months.
So on those funds, and Mr. Jones, feel free to jump in here. As you recall, Council Member, back in March, when the council approved the Partners in Economic Recovery programs, the council directed that a total of 150,000 move from unallocated reserve to the Economic Redevelopment or the Economic Development Fund. We had also put a portion of that 150 into the Community Development Fund. 25,000 went to community development, 125 went to economic development. That was done before we knew anything about the CARES Act. The CARES Act funding came after that. And if you give me one moment, sir, I was going to mention this in my report, but it seems appropriate now. So the town received an allocation of $441,000 in CARES Act funding. And Mr. Jones and Mr. Shelton worked on the administration of those funds. And the town put $203,669 towards food programs since March. 43,500 towards emergency rental assistance. $73,000 and some change to PPEs and other types of protective equipment. We spent nearly $9,000 on deep cleaning of the police station. It's electrostatic cleaning, 2 different occasions. We also had a balance of $90,000 in staff salaries that was a reimbursement. So as we have discussed in previous meetings, any new money reimbursement is going to go to the Economic Development Fund to fund the next 6 months of those same programs, because the CARES Act funding is expired. We have not received our reimbursement yet. We have been assured that we will receive the reimbursements. But Mr. Jones and Mr. Shelton are finalizing the program budget to be able to carry out those programs that you all extended at the last meeting for the next 6 months. The budget assumption is that going into 2022, we would put another $150,000, likely from the unallocated reserve account into economic development and community development. That's our assumption right now. We'll have to see how the numbers pencil out in the next few months. But our assumption is that there will be a need in 2022 to continue either the same programs or develop new programs, but that some impact from COVID is going to continue throughout that next fiscal year.
Okay. All right, that's the main question I had. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman. Are there additional council questions about the budget presentation? I'm not seeing any microphones flicker on. So are there any public questions, public comments about the budget presentation? Okay, hearing
Yes.
none.
I'm sorry, I have a couple of questions.
Please proceed, Ms. Katz.
2 questions, thank you. My first question is just regarding, once again, I know everyone has talked about this opportunity of the speed cameras, but from my perspective, I think the opportunity is not about the speed cameras. The opportunity is the funds that will be available due to hopefully the police department budget being realized through its existing program with the speed camera. So that's just another side of the coin that the speed camera revenues, I think, provide. But the opportunity is the other side of the coin. But my question is regarding that program with the speed cameras. Will the location by the College Park Academy? I've not seen the speed cameras there. Is that something that I've missed, or is that a location where we can put cameras as well to support the safety of the students?
Chief Morris?
Has that been done yet? I guess I'm basically asking, has that been done yet, or is it going to be done in the future?
So yes, Laura, that has been approved by the council as a speed camera area within the code. The town recently took possession of Rivertech Court. That's the area you're speaking about.
Yeah.
So now that it is our roadway, we had to, because of time delays in the town acquiring possession of the roadway, we've re-advertised to make sure that we're posting the appropriate legal notices that are required by the transportation article before we go live with the camera system. So I know that Jessica has taken care of getting those posted, and we have to give a certain period of time to lapse, but that is an approved area for speed camera, and we'll be going live there in the next couple of weeks.
Well, that's good to hear, because I think that's an important place for that program to be implemented, not just for the students, but actually for the wildlife that crosses the road, because that endangers the drivers as well as the wildlife and any pedestrians or bicyclists that are on that nice wide road. But great, that's good to hear.
Yes, ma'am.
Second question regarding the budget is, I remember in this year's budget, there was an allocation made for an additional administrative position. I was curious what the status of that was.
Mr. Jones touched on that.
Came a little
That
late.
that position was authorized as of January 1. I've delayed filling that. I want to see where we are come probably mid-March. And if we can afford it, the need is very much there. I know my staff will tell you the need is very much there. But before I implement that structural change, I want to take another look at the numbers.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for all the due diligence that you put into not only creating a budget, getting approved by the council, and the due diligence the council does, but the actual execution implementation of the budget. I know it's an ongoing, I'm sure it's an ongoing challenge. So appreciate all that you're doing, both the council and the staff.
Thank you, Ms. Katz.
Thank you, Ms. Katz. Are there additional public comments or council comments? on the presentation.
Yeah, this is Leo Dorsey from Riverdale Park Station. I just wanted to echo also the points made by Ms. Katz, as well as some of the council members, just on the importance of having that funding allocated to speed monitoring and calming, in particular with the newly posted and newly reduced speed limits. I do think that the monitoring will have some renewed use and feedback that wouldn't have necessarily been gathered previously when, at least in the Riverdale Park Station community, folks were really just sort of relying on what the sign or the monitoring showed them as they passed. So certainly having that monitoring in conjunction with those speed limits, either in Riverdale Park Station, throughout the town, and certainly by the academy as well, and any schools and playgrounds we have, I do think that that will be really effective. So having that continued monitoring in general is I think something I know folks in our area would certainly appreciate. That's all I have.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment, Mr. Dorsey. Appreciate it. Are there additional public or council comments on this presentation? Hearing none, I'm going to make one minor brief comment of my own, which is that Mr. Jones, you had a statement, I don't remember exactly what it was, that a budget is more than just balancing revenues and expenditures. And I wanted to say that this year in particular, that is completely true. There's a common statement that a budget is a moral document. And I agree with that statement. I think that our budget has to reflect our priorities as a town. And that may mean dipping into reserves in this year. We'll see where we are. We'll see what the budget is. We'll see where the revenues are. So moving on the agenda, the next item is my report. And I have a modestly long one, but I will try to hurry through it. First of all, I'd like to wish everyone a happy new year. I hope everyone had a happy and especially safe holiday season this year. And looking back over the past year, as I like to do at the beginning of each new year, I'm really proud of the town. I'm really proud of the town residents. I'm proud of the town staff. I think we've done well. The town staff in particular, I saw move to respond to this crisis in so many amazing ways, moving quickly to generate the programs to help our residents, pivoting as necessary as funding sources appeared and disappeared, as the programs worked or didn't work well, finding new ways to try to reach the same goals, working to meet the ever shifting and vague requirements of the CARES Act as implemented, and making us successful, extremely successful in doing that. All of this was amazing, amazing activity of the town, and I'm proud to be part of this organization. I'm proud of all of you. And I'm hoping in the year ahead that we have many improvements and that things are going to get better in 2021 than they were in 2020. Moving on to my next topic, the current COVID situation. There's of course good news and bad news, as there always is. The good news is that 2 vaccines are out and they are being administered to people every day. Two vaccines are approved in the United States for use, one by Pfizer, one by Moderna, and they are both safe. They both have from the recently given doses and also from the studies, they have fewer than 1 in 100,000 so-called adverse events. And most of those adverse events are some sort of immune response or a severe reaction of some other sort. And in comparison with the hazard of the coronavirus itself, where we have more than 1 in 1,000 people in the United States, all residents of the United States have died from coronavirus. And comparing that to the hazard that we currently have in Prince George's County, where right now we have about 600 per 100,000 people who are currently infected with COVID-19. then the hazards of the vaccine are minimal. And certainly, I think that the 600 cases of COVID that we have per 100,000 right now are an adverse event that's as bad or worse than the adverse events that happen as a result of the vaccine. So I, for one, will be taking either of those two currently approved vaccines as soon as I possibly can. And I was mentioning to someone at my day job today that I checked the Department of Health website, Prince George's County Department of Health website multiple times per day, hoping to see that we were moving into a new phase and that my opportunity to take it would move closer. There's a third vaccine that's been approved in the United Kingdom and England and not yet approved here. Its efficacy is not as well known. Its safety data is not as well known. I'm hoping to see new data on that soon. It is going to be more easy to produce and deliver vaccine than the two that are currently approved. And so I'm hopeful that will happen soon. The vaccinations, while they're moving as we speak, they're not moving as fast as we would like. A lot of that had to do with the timing of the release of the vaccines and the fact that the health departments are overwhelmed with the management of the pandemic as is, and are having a hard time shouldering this extra duty of distributing and administering the vaccine. But I believe that the departments will be ramping up and we should be getting lots of vaccine into arms soon. And one other thing about the vaccine, there's currently a raging debate in the scientific community about delaying the second dose of these two vaccines in order to get the first dose into more arms quickly. And this is controversial. There's a lot of discussion about unintended outcomes of that. Known outcomes, if we stick with the 2 doses per person with a 3-week delay between the 2 doses. I'm monitoring that discussion and hopeful that the epidemiologists, the doctors, the immunologists, and the microbiologists will be coming together on a policy consensus soon. So that's the good news from the vaccines on the side. The bad news is that the infection rates are bad. They're worse than they have been before in the state of Maryland. The hospitalizations due to COVID are at an all-time high as we speak. The healthcare workers are exhausted, they're burned out. Many of them are getting sick. And the holiday travel and holiday events that people attended without observing appropriate precautions are likely to lead to an even higher spike of cases soon. As someone said, if you were infected on Christmas Eve at an event, then you were at your most infectious stage on New Year's Eve. And so if you went to both events, then both of them could have been chances for spreading the disease. And of course, on top of all of this, we all have pandemic fatigue, not just the members of the healthcare profession, but all of us. I'm tired of sticking around my house. I'm tired of being afraid of people when I'm out in the community. I'm tired of not being able to eat in a restaurant. But this is not the time to let down our resolve. We have to dig deep, because the other thing that's come out in the bad news department is that circulating in England, and it's recently been found to be circulating here, there's a new mutation of the virus that is almost twice as easy to transmit. So the number of the reinfection rate, the number of infections from a given infection for this mutation is not around 1 under current behavioral standards, but it's closer to 1.7, 1.8. And that's really bad, because it means the time for the number of cases to double has gone from perhaps 7 or 8 weeks, where we are right now, to if this new strain becomes predominant, which it looks to be on some time scale, would be doubling of cases every week. And I just want to mention that the spread of this virus, the spread of the pandemic, is driven by our behavior as a collection of individuals. If we behave more safely, as we behave under the advice of the epidemiologists and the doctors, if we maintain social distance, if we wash our hands, if we wear a mask all the time that we are out in public, if we limit our travels, all of these can reduce the spread of the pandemic and give us time to get the vaccines into arms. And so, as I said, in spite of our fatigue, in spite of being tired of all the things that the pandemic has brought us, now is the time to find that extra endurance and double down and be as safe as you can. And I'll add that I hope that everyone gets vaccinated as soon as they possibly can. The final topic I will cover is the follow-up to the September 10th flooding event in town. We had a very nice presentation in December from County Storm Drains. They have completed an initial round of modeling of the Wells Run channel through part of town. And we were able to communicate with them in ways that I've been previously unsuccessful, some of the town priorities and some ideas for how to deal with that in that neighborhood. And I think that they now understand those better, and hopefully we can see some good progress over the months ahead. And that concludes my report for this month. If there are no questions, if there are questions, please let me know. And otherwise, I'll move on to the town manager's report.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council, the staff team, members of the public. First, Happy New Year. And the staff team looks forward to working with all of you to accomplish really great things for the town in 2021. On COVID, I will simply say ditto to the mayor's comments. I did look at Prince George's County's numbers today, and in our zip code, we're about 2,100 cases, 2,060 reported cases in the zip code. So that'd be, we're basically a third of the zip code. So let's say 700 cases in a town of under 7,300 people. It's here, it's impacting us. And as I remind the staff team, we're not immune. And we have to follow and double down, as the mayor said, and follow the safety guidelines. The town hall operations and DPW operations will be closed on January 18th in observance of Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And that's all I have this evening. And Mr. Jones is available when you're ready, Mr. Mayor, for the finance report.
Thank you, Mr. Town Manager. Are there any questions for the town manager before we move on to finance? Council or public?
None here.
Okay, I'm going to move on. We can come back if there are, come back to the town manager if there are questions. Mr. Jones, the finance report, please.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Again, tonight's finance report is going to cover revenue and expenditures for the month of December, as well as the year-to-date total for both of those figures. Revenue for FY 2021 is at $166,531. Expenditures are $613,932, putting us at a deficit for the month at $447,000. Year to date, our revenue is at $5,597,000. Expenditures at $3,306,000, leaving us at a surplus with a year-to-date total of $2,291,000. So if we look at December, we look to be fairly consistent with how we've been in previous years. Our revenue increasing slightly each year, We've been monitoring our expenditures as well. We are down from where we were at last year for the month of December. So again, with everything that's going on, we are constantly monitoring our expenditures and our revenue. And as far as our year-to-date revenue, we're at 77%. So we do like where we are for our revenue and our expenditures as well. And that concludes the finance report for December.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Are there any council questions on the finance report? Are there any public comments or questions on the finance report? Hearing none, may I have a motion to approve or adopt the finance report subject to audit?
So,
Mr.
oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, second.
So a motion to adopt the finance report was made by Councilmember Foe, seconded by Councilmember Lingua. I think just because of a little speed on the unmute button. Is there any discussion of the finance report? Hearing none, I'll do a roll call vote. Councilmember Dixon. Councilmember Dixon, you are muted.
Sorry, I was double muted. Aye.
Thank you. Councilmember Foe,
Aye.
Councilmember Lingua,
Aye.
Councilmember Henry,
Aye.
Councilmember Richardson has arrived. Is that correct?
Yeah, aye.
Thank you. Councilmember Mayers.
Aye.
Thank you. I abstain. The motion passes 6-0-1. Let's move on to the correspondence summary. Are there any items of correspondence that we need to discuss as a council? All members of the council should have received copies of the entire packet. So if you have questions, we can always bring it back in a future month. Okay. Next on the agenda is a fire department report. I did not receive a fire department report. Did staff receive one?
No, sir.
Okay. I know that they are very busy with dealing with the COVID situation, so I hope that we'll be able to return soon. That brings us to council, committee, and ward reports. So let's start on those. First of all, start off with Councilmember Marcia Dixon, Ward 1. We can't hear you. So,
Can you hear me now?
yes.
Okay, sorry. I do not have much to report this month. Happy New Year to everyone. Continue to wear your masks. I found out that I know one additional person who has COVID. Thankfully, they got through it. So I encourage everyone to continue to wear their masks, wash their hands, and socially distance. But I actually don't have anything to report.
Thank you, Councilmember. We will move on then to Councilmember Foe.
Good evening, everyone. First and foremost, I want to apologize to Councilman Lingua for stepping on toes. I do recognize that it is his to usually announce to pass the motion for a monthly finance report, and I definitely did step on your toes. So my apologies, Councilman.
No offense, and I appreciate the eager ambition. So
Yes. Happy New Year, everyone. I don't have much, but I just want to say, Mr. Mayor, listening to you speak about the COVID epidemic that we're going through as a community, as a country, you're remarkably poignant, and you captivate when you speak to it. Your knowledge is obvious, and I'm grateful to hear you every time you comment. It's my #1 source of information, and I thank you for your preparedness. I too want to echo your sentiment that I feel like our staff response and our council response has been truly remarkable. And as I've said multiple times, I'm so proud to be a part of this team and what we've done in this time period. And I'm grateful. So with that, I have had multiple constituent complaints about traffic issues in and amongst Ward 2, specifically along Lafayette, seeing tremendous speed and stop sign issues. And I'm glad that we started talking about that this evening. I know we've been talking about it for a long time, but it's been brought back up because our residents' safety should be #1 foremost amongst these discussions. And I'm excited to see what our walk, bike, drive safety initiative can do to address some of these issues that we are seeing community-wide. Secondly, I saw the first trees planted on the site of Field of Dreams Park. And I don't know how frequently people pay attention to those kind of things, but this has been a 4-year dialogue. And to see these steps, a sidewalk and trees, is truly a remarkable sight in a space that I think is going to shine for all of our community. So just walking by it this morning, I had a resident comment on it to me the other day, and just to see trees being planted and next steps being taken is truly invigorating in this time period where we need it so badly. And last but not least, I want to offer my condolences to Representative Jamie Raskin and his wife, Sarah Bloom Raskin. They suffered a tragic loss of their son, Tommy Raskin. And if you go to Representative Raskin's Medium site, he just wrote one of the most powerful obituaries that I've ever read in my life about his son. It seems like we lost a truly remarkable soul. And I just want to offer my condolences and the town's condolences to a fellow elected official who's going through this loss right now. I encourage you all to read the obituary. I don't know if obituary is the right term, but he tells you about his son and his son's goals, and he really humanizes his son's struggle with depression. And it gets you teary-eyed to read about it, but a lot of people are struggling right now. And I hope that if anybody in our community is feeling those feelings, suffering depression right now, that they know that they can reach out to anyone in this staff, anyone in this town council, and we would be willing to help you. I just think that we need to be here to support our fellow community members suffering with depression right now. And I think reading that makes me want to double down and say that I am available to anybody who may be going through those problems. And with that, I have no more comments.
Thank you for that report, Councilman, and I appreciate your words and your condolences to Representative Raskin. I saw the news article myself and was quite sad about the situation. Councilmember Lingua.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Good evening to everyone out there. Zooming in tonight, it'll be very brief. The Central Kenilworth Avenue Revitalization CDC will be rescheduling its meeting. Normally it would have been tomorrow night. It will be held on January 12th. And as well, the CDC is looking to hold a strategic planning session in early February, about the time of that first weekend. When more comes up on that, I'll be happy to share. Until then, again, Happy New Year to everyone. And Councilmember Bo had brought up my sympathy and condolences to the Raskin family.
Thank you, Councilman Lingua. Councilmember Henry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, everyone. Happy New Year to everyone. I want to give a shout out to the fire department for coming around on Christmas Eve and giving us a little jangle in our community, but bringing the fire equipment around and making some noise in the community and handing out some candy. That was a very enthusiastic moment for our community right there. We all came out and cheered and appreciated their service and what they do for us day in, day out. Continue to echo the sentiments of COVID-19. Let's try to be safe for 2021, improving our conditions, and let this thing be behind us in the rearview mirror. Continue to wear your mask, of course, social distance, and your 6 feet distance. I like to stay 12 feet away from people. And I'll tell you right now, I'm very antisocial. I'm not socializing with anybody. With that, I want to say thanks again to the police department for the outstanding work in which they continue to do for us, protect us, and serve us with a smile. Thankless job, but I thank the courageous men and women on our team for protecting us day in, day out. I continue to congratulate and thank the members of our administrative staff, our team, for doing what they have done, protecting themselves, keeping their families safe. And I wish this for all of us going forward in the future so that we continue to be a part of our community and a part of our families' lives going forward. With that, Mr. Mayor, that's all I have to say. Congratulations to everyone for a great job of what you've done for this community and for the town at large. Thank you very much. I yield.
Thank you, Councilmember. I saw Santa on Christmas Eve also, and he looked a little bit soggy. So I hope he was able to warm up later in the evening.
He did look a little soggy, but
So Councilmember Richardson, do you have a report this evening?
No, Happy New Year, Mayor, and everyone. I'm just fat as a pig. That's about all I can tell you. I'm having problems walking. I'm sick of sitting in the house too. And I work 3 days a week, so I don't see nobody, you know. I'm tired of everything. It just feels like I'm in jail. I don't have anything reported.
I know exactly how you feel, and I share that with you. And I hope that, as I've been able to do, you dig down, you find a little bit more endurance and say, okay, I'm just going to sit in my house and watch the TV or read a book or whatever it is you want to do.
Yeah. But it's good that everybody's doing okay, and good talking to you. I'll be going to work soon, so I'll talk to y'all soon. Okay.
Thanks for your report. It's good to see you.
All right.
Councilmember Mayers, do you have a report this evening?
Happy New Year to Mayor and Council. I don't have a council a mayor's water report at this time.
Okay, well, we will move on then. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is public comments on non-agenda items. We only have one of those this evening, non-agenda items, you can have anything. And consent agenda items, we have the minutes are the only non-consent agenda item. Are there any public comments? You know, public comments are a lot harder on Zoom because you have to scroll up and down and see if anybody's unmuted. Somebody walking up to the microphone is a lot easier to see. So, okay, I will assume there are no public comments, which will take us to the consent agenda. May I please have a motion to approve the consent agenda item?
So moved.
Seconded.
So I didn't see who the mover was. Was that Councilmember Dixon?
Yeah.
And the second, I believe, was Councilmember Foe. Those are simultaneous. Okay. We do not discuss the consent agenda items, so I'll jump directly into a roll call vote. Councilmember Dixon?
Aye.
Councilmember Foe?
Aye.
Councilmember Lingua?
Aye.
Councilmember Henry?
aye.
Councilmember Richardson? She said she was going to work, so she may have already ducked out. Councilmember Mayers. Can't hear you, Councilmember Mayers.
Repeat the question, please.
Motion to approve the consent agenda item, which is the minutes.
Aye. Yes.
And Councilmember Richardson has Councilmember Richardson has left.
Her out. Yes, I was
Okay.
letting her out. That's why.
Okay, thank you. I
You're
abstain.
welcome.
The motion passes 5-0-1. That brings us to the legislative action items. And the first one of these, why don't we have a staff presentation before we have a motion, is Charter Amendment Resolution 2021-CR-01 regarding absentee voting.
Ms.
Staff?
Barnes, can you give a brief summary?
Good evening, Mayor Thompson and members of the council. Thank you again for the opportunity to talk about the preparations that are being made for the town's upcoming election. As we discussed at the work session in preparation for this election, staff conducted a review of the town charter, town code, and by reference in the town code, the actual election manual with the town attorney. Town Attorney Fred Sussman has recommended a housekeeping charter amendment. It's simply to remove a reference to state law that no longer exists. It's a very minor change just to make everything consistent. Due to the amount of time needed for a charter amendment, staff recommend moving forward tonight with introducing the charter amendment so it can be effective as soon as possible.
And the memorandum has the schedule showing when we have to do everything. So introduction this evening, we have a public hearing in early February, adoption in February 22nd, and it would be effective April 12th. And so the election, which is coming up in very early May, then we need to have this in place by that time. Okay, so would someone like to introduce the charter amendment, which requires only an introduction and a brief, I believe we've had a brief summary, and don't even need a second to introduce.
Sure, Mr. Mayor. I would like to introduce, I had the number up there at the top, Charter Amendment, 2021-CR-01 concerning absentee voting in the town of Riverdale Park.
Thank you, council member. We are now starting the clock so we can be ready for the next steps. The next item on the agenda is introduction of ordinance 2021-OR-01 regarding the 2021 town election. And this is something we've done in February in the past. We're trying to get a little bit ahead of schedule given the sort of complexity that the election may have this year. And would the staff like to give a brief presentation about this and then we can have the introduction?
Ms. Barnes?
Certainly, as discussed with the previous agenda item, Article 5, Chapter 29 in the election manual outline preparations that need to happen in order for the upcoming election. Section 508 talks about the conduct of elections in the town charter. It requires that the council take action at a legislative meeting in February to establish certain things. This ordinance is exactly the same as what was adopted in 2019. There are no substantial changes other than just simply the dates to update it for 2021.
Thank you very much. Would a council member like to introduce ordinance 2021-OR-01 regarding the 2021 town election?
Mr. Mayor, if I may, please.
Please do.
I'd like to introduce ordinance 2021-OR-01. It was an ordinance concerning the 2021 town election for the purpose of designating the polling place and hours of operation for the 2021 town election to be held on May 3, 2021. designating the type of ballot to be used in that election, and establishing the candidate filing deadline and candidate filing fee for the 2021 town election to be held on May 3, 2021.
Thank you for that introduction, Councilman. We will now move on to item 3 on the legislative action items. Motion to approve the mayor's nomination for Mixed Use Town Center Local Design Review Committee. Can staff, is there a resolution associated with this? Is that right?
Yes, there is, sir.
Okay, I'll just introduce this. Well, not introduce, just discuss the resolution and the committee membership. This is a recommendation that we make to the Prince George's County Planning Board for membership of the Mixed Use Town Center Local Design Review Committee. And there is a complicated set of requirements for the membership. There are 2 members who represent the town government. There are 2 members who represent businesses in the zone. There are 2 members who represent residents of the town. And there is 1 member who has special expertise and a selection of fields having to do with construction, urban planning, etc. And there's an additional requirement that 1 of the core members, the core 6 members, also has experience in design or planning or one of these fields. And so the slate that is on the screen in front of you is part of the resolution. Meets all of these requirements. It has 5 of the 7 members are returning members, and the 2 new members who are Sarah Billington and Kayla Anthony. Both are heavy hitters. Ms. Billington has a degree in architecture, and Ms. Anthony has a experience and certification in planning. And so I'm very excited about this slate, and I hope that the council will support making this recommendation to the planning board. So with that, may I please have a motion to approve my nominations for the Mixed Use Town Center Local Design Review Committee?
So moved.
Adopt the resolution.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to support the nomination and adopt resolution CR dash, is that the right number? Excuse me, 2121-R-01. Is there any discussion of the motion? Any public comments? Hearing none, seeing no indications that anyone wants to speak, I'll do a roll call vote. Councilmember Dixon?
Aye.
Councilmember Foe?
Aye.
Councilmember Lingua?
Aye.
Councilmember Henry?
Aye.
Councilmember Richardson is absent. Councilmember Mayers?
Aye.
And I abstain. The motion passes 5-0-1. Thank you all for your support of my nominations. The final legislative action item is a motion to authorize the mayor to sign onto a letter from the Greater Washington Coalition in support of a veto override of House Bill 1236. And if staff could provide an overview of this, I would appreciate that.
Ms. Barnes. Perhaps she stepped away. Oh,
No,
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
okay.
During the last General Assembly session, this House bill was passed but subsequently vetoed by the governor. The Greater Washington Partnership has asked the town to sign on to a letter of support regarding veto override. So this is pulling together a coalition of interested parties or stakeholders to really push for a veto override when the General Assembly reconvenes. I believe it's on January the 13th.
And the bill had to do with, for people who are not following this closely, the subject of the bill, the subject of the override.
It's the Mark Train expansion.
So the bill allocated funding and set up a process for expanding Mark Train service and allowing it to extend into Virginia. And this would obviously be a great benefit to the town. It would make our Mark Train station a greater feature if there were more service and more distant service. So that's why we are signing on to this letter calling for override of the veto. So with that background, may I please have a motion to authorize the mayor to sign on to the letter from the Greater Washington Coalition in support of the veto override of House Bill 1236.
So moved.
Seconded.
The motion has been made by Councilmember Lingua, seconded by Councilmember Foe. Is there any council discussion of the motion? Are there any public comments on the motion? Hearing none.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, why did the governor veto on this motion, on this proposal?
As I understand his veto, the governor was concerned about the financial impact of this. And I believe that the spending is in the range of a few $1 million out of the budget. And I feel, and the Greater Washington Coalition also feels that that this is an investment that's worth making, even in these tough times. And I'm not sure that at the time the governor made his veto that he was fully aware of what resources the CARES Act would provide in order to counter issues with COVID.
And when did the governor make his decision?
I would have to go and dig through my ancient emails to find that out. It was last summer.
It's May 7th, sir.
May 7th, thank you.
Of this year?
Of last year. Well, of 2020.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, 2020, yes, okay, that's what I meant.
Yeah,
Okay,
we're in it. No May 7th yet this year. So. Okay, any other comments or questions? Okay, I'll do a roll call vote. Hearing no other comments or questions. Councilmember Dixon?
Aye.
Councilmember Foe?
Aye.
Councilmember Lingua?
Aye.
Councilmember Henry?
I abstain.
Thank you. Councilmember Richardson is absent. Councilmember Mayers?
Aye.
Thank you. I abstain. The motion passes 4-0-2. Thank you for that. Next item is item of new business, the town manager annual performance review format and schedule. If the staff can place the draft up. So this is the town manager evaluation form. It is very similar to last year, except the review period has changed. And I added one question about the response of the town to unanticipated emergency situations, which I thought would be good for covering the way that that the town manager managed the entire crisis during this year. And at the work session, I presented a schedule and set of guidelines for performing this, which are essentially the same last year, except for the dates again have changed. So we would try to have the reviews to me by the before the February, well, ideally on the within a few days of the 19th, the end of the review period. I'm allowed to extend that deadline by a week, and the other terms of what happens if a review form is not received. Meetings that we have to present the summary to town manager, all those are in that detail. And so that, I just wanted to get that going, and this will start by distribution of this evaluation form in an editable form to all members of the council, and mailing of paper copies to those who wish to have a paper copy.
I do. Please put me down for a paper copy, Mr. Mayor.
I hope that Ms. Barnes is collecting that name. She's nodding. Very good.
Thank you, Ms. Barnes.
Ms. Barnes, can I also have a paper copy?
She has nodded and said yes, but she appears to be at least singly muted. Thumbs up.
Thank you.
Of course. Okay. If there's no other discussion of that, I don't believe there's council action required on this. So,
Mayor, if I just may ask a question
yes,
on
sir.
that, filled out. On the, so I'm looking at the soft copy on the financial management town manager evaluation form, item number 6 on it, where it says A through F, and then there's a little blank spot right there. Are we filling in the those slots for you know, expectations in there as far as the rating goes, like 5, 7, 10? There's
a description early on in the form. I'm sorry, I don't have my own copy, so I'm counting on. So
Okay.
there are instructions at the very top, and you put a number between 1 and 10. And
Okay.
page 8 has a table of the meaning of each rating number.
Okay, that's what I was asking. All right, great, thanks.
And it's, as I said, this is very similar to last year.
And the expectation date on this as a return?
Ideally on the 20th, and ideally before the work session. I don't remember exactly which day of the month the work session is on. But I can provide a 1-week extension for council members who have an extraordinary circumstance beyond that.
All right, looks like the work session will be on the 25th.
Thank you. So if we could get that back to me by the 25th, that would be fantastic.
Roger, okay.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, let's move on to unfinished business, item number 1, town election, May 3, 2021. What does
Ms. Barnes?
Certainly. Good evening, Mayor Thompson and members of the council. Just one final item with regard to the upcoming election. Chapter 29 of the town code requires that election judges, members of the Board of Election Appeals, as well as alternate members of the alternate election judges be appointed at a February legislative meeting. That date is quickly approaching. Staff requests that the mayor and council provide names for all of those appointees by January 22nd so that the proper legislation can be prepared in time for the February legislative meeting. So just as a reminder, 8 election judges. We have 4 alternates, which will likely be very important this year if we're still dealing with the impact of COVID-19, and then 7 members of the Board of Election Appeals.
Thank you very much, Ms. Barnes. So I forgot to ask under new business if there are any other items of new business. Do any council members have items of new business?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to, oh, go ahead, CM.
No, please, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. So under unfinished business, in our community, our sidewalks specifically, and Mr. Leffish, maybe you can shed some light on this here. We're seeing a lot of degradation to the sidewalks where it's now sinking, and neighbors, you know, are aging in our community, seniors, and they're walking around, and I was wondering if something can be done to restore the sidewalks in our community.
Yes. Ms. Lewis, are you still on?
I am.
Can you provide an update of your work with the engineering firm and the contractor that you met with?
Absolutely. Good evening, everyone, and Happy New Year. And Mr. Henry, thanks for that question. Back in November, probably mid-November, myself and another member of DPW, along with the contractor that worked on the sidewalk at the Field of Dreams, did a detailed survey of problem sidewalks in Madison Hill and identified about 25 areas where some type of improvement or repair or replacement of the existing sidewalk needed to be done. The primary issue that we saw was tree roots dislocating sidewalks in severe cases at times. And so we were looking for a solution that would hopefully prevent that problem. And we've come to believe that there isn't an absolute solution that would prevent roots, the same tree roots from dislocating any new or replacement sidewalk. So we're going to proceed to have the sidewalks repaired. There will be some level of tree pruning or root pruning so that we at least prolong new roots pushing up the same or replacement sidewalks. At this time, the contractor is not available to complete the work for another maybe 30 days. And so I'm going to reconnect with them in February and try to get on their schedule to have the work done.
Roger that. Thanks for that explanation, Ms. Ivory. I was wondering, and I don't mean to sound cruel to the trees here, but these trees are really overgrown. They really should not have been planted in this community. They are not the right size. No fault to the current administration at all, but is it possible that we can remove some of these extremely large trees that are going to continue to damage the sidewalks and replace them with smaller trees that are less prone to damage the sidewalk? I yield.
Actually, before we did the sidewalk assessment, we had the town's arborists go out and assess the condition and potential lifespan of the trees that are in the community generally. And the report was very positive. Those are very healthy trees. We wouldn't want to remove them as a result of that. The root pruning that would need to be done to replace the damaged sidewalks is about as much as we want to do, as well as keeping them limbed up at the appropriate height. And so again, our arborists reported that the trees are healthy and should be preserved.
I get that as well too, but I want to have one more question that I would lean on to as well too, that these trees are also causing a problem for sewage drainage, and they're rupturing the sewage pipes in our community as well too. We're starting to see that, and I'd expect that this would occur even continuing as the time progresses. Where trees are close to the WSSC foundation and waterway, I would ask that consideration be given to those trees for removal and smaller trees be planted, because that's starting to poke its head up as a futuristic problem in our community. I yield.
I'll just note that we were not aware of that situation. And so I would like to follow up with you to identify the location and then reach out to, I think WSSC for starters.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, are there other items under, since we're sort of jumbled up at the end of the agenda here, any other items under new business or unfinished business for the council? Ms. Katz? Yeah, I'm going to recognize Mr. Lingua first, if that's okay, Ms. Katz.
Oh, please,
Councilman Lingua.
Ladies first, please.
Okay, Ms. Katz.
Thank you, Councilmember Lingua. It's just related to the conversation that just occurred about with Councilmember Henry and Ms. Lewis about the trees. The fact that Ms. Lewis, you do refer to the arborist for expertise regarding the trees. Appreciate that the town does that. The recent event I went to where, and Ms. Lewis, maybe you can help me. It was the PG County, it was an event where we toured the town and looked at trees with arborists. It was at that point that I learned that it's not tree roots that destroy pipes. It's tree roots that find the holes that already exist in pipes. So, to make sure that we understand cause and effect based on you know, the data and the science and knowledge that's already out there, just to make sure that, you know, we confirm that might be the case, versus the trees actually crushing pipes, which I don't think is what the tree roots do, based on what the arborist had said. So it's a common misconception, I think, about tree roots, but the thing it is that they do find the sources of water for sure, and they go into the holes that already exist.
Thank you, Ms. Katz.
That's all.
Additional comments on this item, or?
That's right. I just want to make sure that in our decision making, it was actually in the budget slides tonight, which was good, is that data-driven decision making that's used in this case, which would be great.
I'm a big fan of data-driven solutions and thinking, as you know.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Lingua.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Small item of new business. I received a call today from a former council member for the town of University Park, David Brosh, regarding an expansion of sorts of two things, actually. An expansion of sorts of the Greater Riverdale Cares Route 1 Community Cares scope to include more municipalities to go down south towards, to include Mount Rainier, and go northwards up towards Berwyn Heights and up towards Beltway. They're looking to expand as well. They're looking to reach out to other organizations for funding. And Mr. Brosh was wondering if the town would consider signing a letter of support for, and this is where I still need to clarify with Mr. Brosh, be it if that's going to be for the expansion and or for the letter that they will be sending out, I guess by what I was hearing from Mr. Brosh, something along the lines of a recommendation / testimonial to how the program has worked so far and how it's been a benefit to the town in terms of addressing needs of residents for food.
So this sounds to me like a fine thing to do. Can we discuss this offline? I mean, do you think that there's a council action that's required this evening, or do we want? It sounds like this is still sort of in the early stages of what the letter would say.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's just more that I wanted to. I mean, it was Mr. Brosh and I were exchanging voice messages today, being that it is a Monday and everyone's back to work. So I could talk with them more, find out, and send along some more information if that's all right with everybody.
That sounds great.
As to whether or not this requires council action, you know, I would. I'm just bringing it before the body.
I mean, I'm certainly willing.
Consideration.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, me personally, I would kind of like to find out a little bit more with, you know, what their plan is and what they're doing. So and get an understanding of where they're trying to go. You know, what their objective is.
Sure.
I mean, obviously it's to feed more folks, but I mean, what are they? What is behind the expansion down towards Mount Rainier as well up toward Beltway? It's, you know, that's what I'm curious about. I think, from my understanding, they're thinking as well, if we're providing a greater need elsewhere, it may be something that's going to be more attractive to other donors, i.e. be that private donors, in terms of they're addressing a need over a broader area than the area they currently are now.
Mhm. Okay, well, I thank you for bringing the issue before us. And as I said, I'm happy to be pulled into the conversation if you'd like to pull me in. And I think there are certain things that we can do in the absence of council action, just for describing our experiences and how it's worked out for any letter, and but taking a formal position over the expansion, I think we might want to wait for council input on that.
Okay, and I can also talk with BCAR President Dennis Nolan, Vice President Alice Bishop, as well as Executive Director Trish Parker about this as well.
Very good. Okay. Are there any questions for Councilman Lingua on this? Comments? Do a quick scroll up and down. Okay, are there other items of new business or unfinished business to discuss this evening? Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. May I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion has been made by Councilmember Foe, seconded by Councilmember Dixon. There's no discussion of a motion to adjourn, so I'll move directly to the roll call vote. Councilmember Dixon.
Aye.
Councilmember Foe.
Aye.
Councilmember Lingua.
Aye.
Councilmember Henry.
Aye.
Councilmember Richardson has gone to work, and Councilmember Mayers.
Aye.
I abstain. The motion passes 5-0-1. We are adjourned at 9:08 p.m. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you, everyone.
Very much. Good night, everybody.
Good night.